So this is Till We Have Faces, Book 2, Chapter 1. In the beginning of the book, Oral slash the Queen in her old age is writing her book. She's going through and revising and kind of taking away that emotional angle that she had written from and is trying to make it more accurate to what actually had happened. And through this, she begins reflecting on her childhood memories with her sister, Redival, and realizing that there were pleasant moments that she'd have with her. People begin to return from her past. The Terran, who was the ex-guard turned eunuch, had come back and was telling the queen, and they were reminiscing about their past, and he was telling the queen that the only reason he really spent time with Redival was because of her looks and because Redival had claimed how lonely she was, that Oral had neglected her in favor of the fox and Psyche. And the queen had never even thought about that because she had always seen Redival as being the more privileged of the two of them. So dreams and divine punishment. During the day, the queen would be working on her book the whole time. Maybe she'd do some other work, but for the most part, she was devoted to her book. And at night, when she would sleep, she was kind of plagued with these dreams or visions of Psyche and her tasks. Not specifically Psyche, but just the tasks. And she would be the one performing the tasks as well. And in this one, where she had to separate the grain, she herself was the little ant that would carry the large flecks of grain and put them and sort them out. Later on, we discover that Bardia has not shown up for work, and the queen is wondering what's keeping him in bed. Is it his wife that's not letting him leave? She doesn't know until the priest Arnhem comes and tells her that it's because he's ill. And at this news, she kind of stands up and is ready to go to see him. But Arnhem says, no, if you go, he'll just think about how much work he has to do and he won't be able to rest. The queen agrees and doesn't go to see him. 5 days go by. The priest comes back and he says that Bardia has died. And the queen is feeling very saddened by this because she never got to tell him that she had loved him. Post-funeral, she goes to talk with Lady Ansett to help her through the grieving process, but it's really cold and awkward when they meet each other, and Lady Ansett ends up blaming the queen for overworking Bardia, and but the queen said that Bardia never told her that he was exhausted, and Ansett said, well, he would never tell you he was exhausted because he was a hard worker. Ansett claimed that the queen had also taken every aspect of Bardia from her, because of all this time they spent together on the battlefield or in the pillar room. They just never, the queen had always had Bardia like 90% of his life, and the 10% left was the lover aspect that the wife had. And the queen accused her of being jealous, and after that removed her veil to show that her face was not pleasant and that she had no reason to be jealous. But instead of cowering in fear from her looks, which is what the queen had expected, Lady Ansett had actually started crying and embraced the queen because she realized that she truly did love Bardia. And then once that short-lived truce was over, Ansett said that she could never go to the queen to tell her about Bardia either, because that's not her role as a wife. As a wife, she had to support his decisions. And then Lady Ansett said that the queen would never understand this or this sort of love, of like commoner's love, because the queen was of divine blood, and so she only understood the love of the divine. So, continuing from there, then Lady Ansett had claimed that the queen had always gorged on other people's lives, and that it like led to their destruction, i.e., Bardia, hers, the fox, and her sisters. And in that moment, Oral became blind with fury, and before she regained her composure, she had said that if this had happened in her father's presence, it would not end as well. And so she left, and on her way back, she thought about how she would send home Lady Ansett's son, Elerdia, to his mother and not let him continue with his work, but she didn't. Instead, she reflected on how she did keep Bardia late, and she did accept that she had not treated him as well as she should have. And eventually she had to let those feelings of him go, the feelings of love for him. She had to release them because they were sickening to her. And then she realized that her greed for him wasn't just the only part of his destruction, but it was also his wife's jealousy. And so she stopped craving for Bardia, and with that, it felt like her soul left as well. And this was seen as a divine punishment from the gods. Finally, I made two connections to this from one, the Great Divorce, and two, Metamorphoses. In the Great Divorce, we see examples of selfish and possessive love, which is what the queen and Bardia's wife displayed towards Bardia. And in Metamorphoses, obviously, the challenges that Psyche had to face to go back to Cupid, except that Auril is performing these challenges to help Psyche, almost. And then finally, discussion questions. Do you think that Bardia's death is the fault of the queen, Lady Ansett, or both, and why? And do you think that Lady Ansett was right that Auril didn't understand Commoner's love?